Drag queens have become these touchstones in America's culture wars. Even though a lot of the controversy is caught up in misunderstandings. Even though RuPaul, perhaps America's most famous drag queen, is a beloved TV star. As RuPaul says, we're all born naked. The rest is drag. We meet the North Country's drag queens and a drag king on today's story of the day.
Support for Story of the Day comes from the Wild Center in Tupper Lake, dedicated to strengthening visitors' connections to the natural world. More at wildcenter.org.
Hey, I'm David Sommerstein. It's Monday, August 18th. First up, the Adirondack Park Agency's potential move to downtown Saranac Lake is taking another small step forward. That's after site reports for a potential new location came back relatively clean. Amy Feiereisel has more.
Last week, the Adirondack Park Agency released a collection of recent environmental and building reports for its proposed site in Saranac Lake, the Paul Smith's Power and Light Company building. As the Adirondack Daily Enterprise reports, the site analysis showed no major red flags. That paves the way for the APA to do further design work. In 2022, the APA received $29 million from the state for a new headquarters. Since then, the agency has been pursuing a move from its current location in Raybrook to the Power and Light building, which would include renovations and constructing a new second building. The plans have not been without controversy, with different Saranac Lake groups voicing support in opposition to the move. A group of former APA employees wrote a letter to Governor Kathy Hochul questioning the ethics of the process. That led to an investigation of the APA's executive director, Barbara Rice, whose family owns a business in Saranac Lake. The probe by the State Inspector General's office found allegations of impropriety, quote, unsubstantiated, end quote. The overall positive site reports mean the agency is likely to move forward with confirming site feasibility. The APA has not yet made a formal commitment to the Paul Smith's building. Amy Feiereisel, North Country Public Radio.
In big cities, drag shows are a regular weekend event. But they're a lot harder to find in small rural regions where the queer community faces higher rates of discrimination. Across the North Country, a small but devoted group of performers has been bringing drag to local stages for decades. They say their shows are about more than entertainment. They're a way to create acceptance for LGBTQ people in the region. David Escobar has a story.
Not much has changed at the Belvedere restaurant since it opened in 1933. The wood-paneled walls and neon sign out front feel like a time capsule of Saranac Lake. But every few months, there's a hostess dressed in a wig and high heels, and they're not serving food.
On the count of three, we're going to say congrats. 1, 2, 3.
That's George Connolly, who performs as drag queen Victoria Bowmore. Since 2022, he's headlined the restaurant's recurring drag brunch alongside a rotating cast of local performers.
We'll get somebody that does Aretha Franklin, somebody that does Rihanna, somebody that does Ariana Grande, somebody that might do Dolly Parton. So it is a mix of all kinds of genres, all kinds of music.
Connolly's been doing drag for more than 20 years. It all started in a Baltimore gay bar where he worked part-time after college. One of the bar's resident queens encouraged him to get on stage for an employees-only drag show.
She saw something with me on stage and was like, you should really do this more often.
Soon, Connolly was performing whenever he could escape his 9-to-5 desk job on Capitol Hill.
It really is a creative outlet. Drag has a chance to kind of let loose and, get rid of that stuffiness. And I can do that on a microphone in public, being in drag.
Connolly started traveling to Saranac Lake to perform at the Belvedere's drag brunch and eventually settled there in 2024. He says performing in the Adirondacks feels different from the city, and in some ways more meaningful.
Doing it out in a small rural community or like a small town like this, I think is more important because it gives you the chance to, have a safe space, have an opening at a bar where there aren't typically gay bars.
Aside from a handful of pride parades in June, there are few dedicated spaces for drag in the North Country. So Connolly and other performers have created their own in bars, restaurants, and theaters. In March, he showcased his lip-sync skills in a floor-length beaded gown at the region's first ever drag pageant. Being a drag artist isn't all glitter and glamour. They've become polarizing figures, often due to misconceptions about what it means to do drag.
Some people think because I am a drag performer that I want to be a woman because I dress up like a woman, or that after the shows I stay being a woman.
That's Michael Cameron, who lives in Watertown and goes by the drag name Amber Sky. He says some performers view drag as an outlet to explore and embrace their gender identity. But doing drag doesn't mean a person is transgender, and drag isn't connected to sex. In its most basic form, drag queens are cisgender men who perform dressed as women. Tony Curtis and Jack Lemmon did it in Some Like It Hot in 1959. Cameron says his drag persona is more of a character.
It's like putting on a musical or a play. You know, I can be Amber Sky for 8 to 10 hours, and then she's back in the closet until the next time.
Cameron has won nearly every drag pageant title you can win in New York. He's also used drag to raise money for charity and host shows across the North Country for the past 25 years. He says the start of that career wasn't easy.
You know, most of the performers, like myself, were very, skittish of who we told or very secretive about certain things. You know, when it came time to go to the store to shop for costumes, outfits, and stuff like that, it wasn't as comfortable for me in 2000 when I started.
Sean Brace, who goes by the drag name Misty Nights, shares a similar experience.
I don't feel as weird as I used to years ago walking down the street, heading to a bar, in drag, as I used to. Still, there are some times. I feel like it's gotten more acceptable.
Brace grew up in Peru near Plattsburgh and has been performing for about 20 years. Like many of his fellow performers, Brace has a day job. Paying for wigs, costumes, heels, and makeup takes investment.
I know some queens that just do thrift store, which is great. And there are some queens out there who will gladly, because they have the sources, to spend thousands upon $1,000 on dresses, wigs. I'm kind of in between. If I see a sale, I will go for it.
Bray says that spirit of creativity reflects the diversity of the North Country's drag scene. Some performers are comedians. There's also pageant competitors and lip-sync assassins. Kit Thomas says their drag persona Hunter Down is harder to define.
He's mysterious. He's electric. But once I get into Hunter Down, I feel like such a star.
Thomas is from Akwesasne. They started performing as a drag king in 2010 when they lived in North Carolina. They moved back to the St. Regis Mohawk Reservation in 2021 and have brought their drag persona to shows around the North Country and Canada.
It's usually 4 to 6 other queens and then one king. I don't know if there's various reasons why it could be like that. Maybe there's not enough talent, or maybe, sometimes prejudice comes into play.
Thomas says drag kings aren't as well represented in pop culture, so they don't always receive the same amount of attention and support as drag queens. But they say performing as Hunter Down isn't about validation.
Because for me, being a king is an art, and it has so much respect. And I want to pay homage to the kings before me, the people who put in the work for, just for me to be able to do what I do.
In the North Country, Thomas says drag shows may be smaller and less frequent, but they carry more weight.
We're making space for not only queens and kings, but for the queer community. And it's much needed up here. It's more needed, I think, in the smaller, closed-minded towns. So that's why I keep doing drag in, places like Potsdam and Malone and Plattsburgh and now Cornwall, Ontario. But yeah, it's definitely needed more in these pockets.
For Sean Brace, every pageant, brunch, and nightclub show is a chance to create joy for fellow LGBTQ people living in the North Country. He says even on the hardest days, when he doesn't feel like painting his face or gluing down a wig, he can't imagine stepping out of the spotlight.
I may switch from heels to flats or barefoot. If I get to the walker stage, then I might have to, figure out something else. But as long as there's people asking, people like, hey, do you want to do this? Do you want to do that? I will gladly do it.
Until that day comes, Brace won't be hanging up his heels anytime soon. David Escobar, North Country Public Radio.
The photos that go with the story are just terrific. The people you heard in drag and not in drag, just as civilians, Check it out on our website, ncpr.org. Music today by Patricia Julian of Burlington and Matt Bullwinkle of Potsdam. I'm David Sommerstein, North Country Public Radio.